The room fell silent as the fabric tore. In front of governors, investors, and New York's elite, Regina Whitmore, the queen of high society, ripped the maid's uniform open for everyone to see. Evelyn stood frozen, her chest heaving, her face flushed with shame, but she didn't cry. And then, Adrian Whitmore rose. His voice was calm, but his words shook the chandelier above them. "You don't get to strip someone of dignity just because you gave birth to me." He wrapped his jacket around Evelyn's shoulders. And in that moment, love became rebellion, and silence became power. The Whitmore estate sat like royalty above the hills of Fairview, towering over the city like a secret kept by the rich. With its marble columns and 10-acre gardens, it wasn't just a home, it was a world. Inside, time moved slower, quieter, but never kinder. Evelyn Harris didn't belong to that world. At 28, Evelyn had seen more struggle than comfort. She grew up in the run-down side of Edison Grove, where laundry lines hung like prayer flags and every paycheck had to stretch like rubber bands. Her mother worked nights at a hospital cafeteria. Her father had vanished before her 3rd birthday. And Evelyn, she'd grown up fast, too fast. She never looked for sympathy, only stability. And somehow she found it in the most unlikely place, working as a live-in housekeeper for one of the wealthiest families in the state. Evelyn knew how to be small. She moved through the halls without sound, folded towels like origami, memorized the guests' allergies, and kept her emotions tucked behind her lips. The other staff respected her work ethic. The family barely noticed her, except for one man, Adrian Whitmore, the heir to the Whitmore fortune. 33, tall, clean-cut, sharp jawline, and always dressed in tailored suits like he was headed to a photo shoot. Women on magazine covers wanted him. Stockholders trusted him. But his eyes, those storm gray eyes, carried a loneliness Evelyn could recognize without words. She never meant to catch his attention. But somehow, she did. Maybe it was the way she gently wiped smudges off family portraits, or how she consoled the gardener's son when he scraped his knee, or maybe, just maybe, it was because she didn't try. Adrian's mother, Regina Whitmore, was the queen of that mansion, and she acted like it. At 62, she walked like every step was a power move. She believed in tradition, reputation, and control. In her eyes, the help were functional, not human. Regina didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her tone could freeze a summer day. And her favorite tool of control was her stare, the kind that made grown men forget their own names. She had tolerated Evelyn for 2 years, until she noticed her son looking at the maid like she was more than just the help. Evelyn was dusting shelves in the private library one afternoon when Adrian entered without a word. His presence always made the air shift, calmer, but charged. "You shouldn't let her talk to you like that," he said, his voice low and steady. Evelyn straightened, caught off guard. "Excuse me, sir. My mother, she's out of line, you don't have to accept it." Evelyn's response was measured. "This is her house, I'm not here to be accepted, I'm here to work." He took a slow breath, studying her. "That doesn't mean you deserve disrespect." Their eyes locked just for a second, and in that brief silence, something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them dared name. That evening, the Whitmores hosted a quiet dinner with close friends. Evelyn served at the head table, where Regina sat flanked by her socialite circle. As Evelyn poured wine beside Regina's longtime friend, Meredith Langston, the older woman narrowed her eyes. "She's rather pretty, isn't she, for a housekeeper?" Regina didn't even look up. "She's a wallflower. Pretty ones fade fast." Evelyn heard it, every word. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She simply nodded and stepped away. Adrian clenched his jaw, his knuckles white against the edge of the table. The estate buzzed in preparation for the annual Whitmore Gala, a black tie affair that attracted governors, CEOs, and old money from every corner of the state. Regina oversaw every detail herself, down to the stitching on the napkins. Evelyn, of course, was assigned to serve the eastern side of the ballroom. But Clara, her only real friend among the staff, warned her. "She's planning something, Evelyn, just keep your head down." "I always do," Evelyn said with a tired smile, but she knew Clara was right. Something was coming, and for the first time, Evelyn wasn't sure if she could stay invisible. Late that night, Evelyn sat in the servants' quarters reviewing the guest list. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. The kind that comes before a storm you know is going to hit, but you still hope it won't. And somewhere upstairs, Regina Whitmore was rehearsing a scene she planned to deliver with perfect cruelty. Evelyn wouldn't see it coming, but someone else would. The Whitmore mansion didn't sleep the night before the gala. Upstairs, tailors adjusted tuxedos and evening gowns. Downstairs, the kitchen staff prepped hors d'oeuvres that looked more like art than food. Every marble floor was polished twice, and every servant was briefed again and again on posture, placement, and perfection. To the world, the gala was just another charity event hosted by the powerful Whitmores. But to Evelyn, it felt like walking into a trap blindfolded. Regina Whitmore summoned Evelyn to the drawing room just after midnight. The room smelled of jasmine and leather. The fireplace crackled. Regina sat with her legs crossed, not bothering to look up from her teacup. "I assume you know your role for tomorrow," she said, voice smooth like poison. "Yes, ma'am. East Wing service, wine and hors d'oeuvres." Evelyn's tone was polite, detached. Regina finally looked up, her eyes sharp as broken glass. "Good, because you seem to have forgotten something else lately." Evelyn said nothing. "You are staff," Regina continued. "Not family, not special, and certainly not someone my son should be looking at twice." There it was, the slap that didn't need a hand. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she nodded. "I understand, ma'am." Regina set her cup down gently. "I hope you do, because if you ever misread your place again, I'll remind you, in front of everyone." Upstairs, Adrian Whitmore couldn't sleep. He stood by his bedroom window, watching the moonlight spill across the manicured lawn. Something twisted in his chest, and it wasn't about business. It wasn't about investors or speeches. It was about Evelyn, her silence, her strength. The way she endured humiliation with Evelyn he hadn't seen even in boardrooms filled with billionaires. He hated the way his mother treated her. He hated even more that he had let it go on. Tomorrow, he told himself, tomorrow I won't stay silent. Evelyn woke before dawn. She moved like clockwork, uniform pressed, hair tied, shoes polished. But inside, she felt a tremor, like the moment before a glass tips. Clara stopped her in the corridor. "Hey, you okay?" Evelyn gave a soft nod. "I just want to get through the night." Clara lowered her voice. "She's watching you, be careful." "I always am," Evelyn said, but she could feel it, the walls were closing in. By 6 o'clock, the driveway lit up with headlights and camera flashes. Valets opened doors for senators and fashion designers. Inside, string quartets played Vivaldi beneath chandeliers worth more than Evelyn's entire neighborhood. Every guest wore their importance like cologne. Evelyn moved through it all like a shadow, serving wine, adjusting place cards, memorizing titles. Then she saw Adrian. He stood near the entrance, shaking hands, flashing that practiced smile. But the moment his eyes met Evelyn's, he paused. No words, just a silent nod. And somehow that tiny gesture gave her breath again. As the ballroom filled, so did the air with tension. Regina watched her son watching Evelyn. Meredith Langston leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Both women laughed, but Regina's eyes never left Evelyn. By the first course, Evelyn had served 2 senators, a tech mogul and someone who used to date a prince. Her hands remained steady, but her pulse was racing. She could feel it. Everyone was watching. Not out loud, but in the glances, the murmurs. She was the crack in a perfect mirror. It happened during the main course. Evelyn stepped forward to serve wine near the head table. Regina's voice pierced the air. Stop! The room fell silent, forks froze midair, conversations died mid-sentence. Come closer, Regina said. Evelyn did, slowly, carefully, her heart pounding in her ears. Regina looked her up and down, then spoke clearly so everyone could hear. You've been in this house 2 years and still can't walk like a professional. Look at you, acting as if you belong here. Evelyn whispered, I'm sorry, ma'am, but Regina wasn't finished. You think because my son is polite to you that you are anything more than a maid? And then Regina reached forward and ripped Evelyn's uniform. Gasps echoed like thunder across the ballroom. Evelyn staggered back, clutching the torn fabric. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Her lips trembled, but she held her ground. The room was frozen in horror. Then, a chair scraped against the marble. Adrian rose. He walked slowly, deliberately. The entire room watched in stunned silence. He took off his tuxedo jacket and gently draped it over Evelyn's shoulders. His hand rested on her trembling back, steady and calm. Then he looked at his mother. Enough! Regina's mouth opened, but no sound came. You humiliated her in front of everyone, Adrian said, voice low but unshakable. Not because she failed, but because you couldn't stand that someone with less had more Evelyn than you. Murmurs rippled through the guests. Regina hissed, You're defending her, against your own mother? Adrian didn't flinch. I'm defending what's right. That's what family should stand for. The gala was no longer a celebration. It was a reckoning. Some guests looked down, embarrassed. Others nodded silently in support. Even Meredith Langston couldn't hide her discomfort. Evelyn stood still, tears now rolling freely, not from shame, but from release. Adrian turned to her. You don't owe anyone an apology, he said. You deserve dignity. Always. No one said another word. The music had stopped. But something louder filled the air. Truth. The music never resumed. The Whitmore Gala, meant to dazzle the city's elite, ended in stunned silence. No one touched dessert. The champagne remained untouched. The chandelier sparkled above a room filled with awkward shuffles and forced smiles, but the warmth had gone. Regina Whitmore had tried to humiliate a maid. Instead, she exposed herself. And Adrian Whitmore, her perfectly trained son, had finally broken character. He hadn't just defended Evelyn, he declared where his heart stood. And that, in Regina's world, was treason. The next morning, the Whitmore estate felt like a crime scene. Servants whispered behind kitchen doors. Butler logs went untouched. Even the usual clicks of high heels on marble were softer, more hesitant. Evelyn stayed in her room long after sunrise. Clara had slipped in around 6 with tea and soft eyes. You okay? Evelyn nodded, holding the warm mug tightly. I still can't believe it happened. Clara sat beside her, her voice gentle. You didn't fall apart, Evelyn. You stood taller than anyone last night. Evelyn shook her head. No, I stood because he did. But he wouldn't have stood, Clara replied, if you weren't worth standing for. By noon, the story had made it beyond the Whitmore gates. At a nearby brunch spot, 2 guests from the gala discussed it over grapefruit mimosas. I heard she ripped the poor girl's uniform. No, ripped it right in front of everyone. And Adrian just stood up and gave her his coat like he was in a movie. He looked at his mother like she was the maid. That's going to cost Regina. Social capital is currency at their level. Another woman sipped her drink and leaned in. And what about the maid? Oh, she's not just a maid anymore. She's the girl who made Adrian Whitmore choose a side. Adrian didn't leave the mansion after the gala. He canceled meetings, ignored calls, stayed home. He walked the halls quietly, thinking of how many times he had seen Evelyn hurt and done nothing. It was never about love at first sight. It was about respect, something so many people in his world treated like an accessory. He found her that afternoon in the sunroom, watering the ivy that trailed along the walls. She looked up, startled. I didn't think you'd come down here. I didn't think I'd wait this long, he replied. They stood in silence for a beat. Then he said, I'm sorry. Evelyn set the watering can down. "It wasn't you." "But it happened in my house," he said. "My family. I can't let that be the last word." Regina Whitmore didn't wait long. By evening, she summoned Adrian to the parlor, her expression colder than the winter landscape outside. "You've embarrassed this family in front of governors and legacy donors." "I defended someone who was humiliated in front of them," Adrian corrected. Regina's voice sharpened. "You made us look weak. You looked like a fool draping your Armani jacket over a servant." "Her name is Evelyn," Adrian said. Regina's lips twitched. "She's a phase, and when it passes, you'll thank me for protecting you." He shook his head. "No, Mother, what I felt last night wasn't weakness, it was clarity. You would trade your legacy for her?" "I'd trade anything," Adrian said, "for a life that's actually mine." The next day, Evelyn returned to work. She wasn't sure what she expected: shunning, whispers, reassignment. Instead, she found the kitchen staff offering soft smiles. The doorman greeted her by name. Even Mr. Dillard, the longtime butler who once called her the quiet one, nodded in approval. "You've earned something most people in this house never will," he told her. "Their respect." But Evelyn didn't feel triumphant. She felt exposed, vulnerable. She didn't ask for any of this. All she ever wanted was to work, send money to her mother, and survive in silence. Now the silence had been shattered, and she didn't know what to do with the noise. That evening, Evelyn found an envelope on her pillow. No stamp, no name. Inside, a folded note in tight handwriting. "Don't let this house decide who you are. You are not their roles. You are not their rules. You are someone they could never build even with all their money. Don't shrink just because their ceilings are low." There was no signature, but Evelyn knew exactly who it was from, and she didn't know whether to smile or cry. In the main hall, a portrait of Whitmore patriarchs lined the walls. Generations of men in tuxedos, staring, judging. And yet, for the first time, Adrian stood beneath them, different. He looked up at the painted faces and asked himself the one question no one in that family had ever dared ask. "What if I don't want to become one of you?" Because loving Evelyn meant shedding the layers they'd forced him to wear since birth. It meant risking reputation, tradition, power, but maybe, just maybe, that was the first real freedom he'd ever tasted. The Whitmore mansion looked the same, but something was off. Something quieter, like a breath held too long. The chandeliers still sparkled. The gardeners still trimmed hedges to military precision. The staff still polished silver that already gleamed. But beneath the luxury, something raw stirred, a tension that hadn't existed before Evelyn Harris became impossible to ignore. Evelyn could feel it. She'd walk into a room, and conversation would pause just a second too long. People smiled at her now, but they weren't just smiles, they were reactions, respect, curiosity, uncertainty. She had become more than the maid. She was now the woman Regina Whitmore tried to destroy and failed. Clara noticed it too. "You're not invisible anymore," she whispered one morning as they ironed linens. "Feels like the whole house is holding its breath around you." Evelyn gave a tight smile. "I'd rather be invisible again," but even she knew that door had closed. In her private suite, Regina Whitmore stared at her own reflection. No makeup, no pearls, just herself. She touched the edges of her cheekbones, the places where pride had long held its shape. But now something wavered, something foreign. Shame. She poured herself a brandy, the bottle clinking slightly in her grip. That night at the gala haunted her, not because of what she did, but because of what it revealed. Her son didn't fear her anymore, and worse, he had seen her, fully, clearly, and still chose the maid. 3 days after the gala, Evelyn received a letter on official Whitmore letterhead, but it wasn't a reprimand. It was an offer. "MS. Harris. In recognition of your discretion, professionalism, and integrity, we would like to offer you a promotion to house manager. This includes private quarters, a salary increase, and authority over staff scheduling and protocol. Please respond by end of week. Whitmore Estate Admin Office." Evelyn stared at the letter. House manager, her? Clara saw the shock on her face and gasped. You're moving up. Evelyn wasn't so sure. It wasn't just a job offer, it was a spotlight. And spotlights don't protect you, they expose you. That evening, as Evelyn walked past the west corridor, a voice stopped her. Come in. It was Regina. Evelyn hesitated but stepped inside. The older woman sat by the fireplace, not in her usual power pose, but slightly slouched, hands clasped tight. I suppose congratulations are in order, Regina said. Evelyn nodded slowly. I haven't accepted yet. Regina arched an eyebrow. Why not? Evelyn swallowed. Because I'm not sure it's a promotion or a punishment. Regina's lips curved ever so slightly. You've changed. Evelyn shook her head. No, I've just stopped hiding. Silence. Then Regina looked away, her voice softer than Evelyn had ever heard. I wasn't always like this, you know. Evelyn didn't answer. Regina continued, when my husband died, they expected me to fail. The board, the media, even my own family, I had to become ice to survive. Evelyn finally spoke. I understand survival, but cruelty is a choice. That stung and it showed. Regina looked down. He loves you. Evelyn's breath caught. I don't understand it, Regina continued, but I see it, and I can't stop it. Clara asked her later that night, while folding towels in the staff quarters. Evelyn paused, then answered honestly, I don't know what to call it. I just know that when he looked at me that night, he didn't see a maid. He saw me. Clara smiled. Then maybe, it's time you see yourself too. 2 days later, Evelyn found Adrian by the garden steps, the same spot where he once passed her without a word. Only this time he was waiting. I don't want this to get buried, he said, beneath titles and silence. Evelyn folded her arms, then say it plainly. He took a breath. I admire you deeply. You carry pain without bitterness. You treat people with kindness even when they don't deserve it. You make me question everything I was raised to believe. Evelyn's voice shook. People are watching your legacy. My legacy doesn't matter if it doesn't have you in it, Adrian interrupted. Evelyn's heart raced. But I won't force you into this, he added. I just need you to know. I see you, and I'm here when you're ready. That night, Evelyn stood before her mirror, not in uniform, not as a maid, not as a victim, just herself. She pulled out the letter offering her the new position. She placed it next to a photo of her mother who once said, You can survive the world without a crown, baby girl, but don't let anyone steal your spine. Evelyn didn't know what tomorrow held, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid. The days after Evelyn received her promotion felt like standing on the edge of something, not quite falling, not quite flying. The estate was quieter than usual, like even the walls knew a shift was coming. Evelyn hadn't given her answer yet, not to the job, not to Adrian, not to herself. She moved through the halls with quiet precision, but for the first time she was seen. Not just watched, seen. Even the staff who used to keep their distance now met her eyes with a mix of admiration and a bit of awe. It was a Wednesday morning when the past came back to find her. Evelyn had just stepped outside to collect the weekly floral delivery when she heard a voice she hadn't heard in over a decade. Evelyn? She froze, turning around, her breath caught. It was Camille, her older half-sister, the one who had disappeared after their father left, the one Evelyn had once shared a mattress with in a shelter when they were kids. Camille looked tired, older, but her eyes, they were still fire. You work here? She asked, glancing toward the Whitmore gates. Evelyn hesitated. Yeah, I do. Camille looked her up and down. So you finally made it out of the neighborhood, good for you. Evelyn shifted. What are you doing here? Camille pulled out a crumpled envelope. I came to return this, it's yours. Evelyn opened it. Inside was a birth certificate. Her heart stopped. She read the father's name, Henry Whitmore. That night, Evelyn sat in her quarters, staring at the paper. Henry Whitmore, Adrian's father, Regina's husband, her biological father. She felt like the floor beneath her had vanished. Clara knocked on the door, but Evelyn couldn't answer. How do you explain something that rewrites who you are? She wasn't just the maid who had fallen for the heir, she was his sister's daughter. Regina's husband had fathered a child outside of his marriage, and no one knew, except now Evelyn did, and she had no idea what to do with it. Adrian found the birth certificate on her table the next morning. He didn't need an explanation. The resemblance to his father's signature was too familiar. He walked straight into the drawing room where Regina sat, sipping espresso and reading the financial section. "Did you know?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Know what? That father had a daughter outside this house, that she's here, in this house." Regina's fingers froze. Very slowly, she set the newspaper down. "I suspected," she said, voice even, "years ago. But by the time I confirmed it, your father was gone. And she was already a teenager. I thought if I ignored it, it would stay in the past." Adrian stared at her. "You hired her, didn't you? On purpose." Regina finally met his eyes. "Yes, I wanted to keep her close, where I could control the narrative." Adrian's voice cracked. "You humiliated her, tore her clothes, shamed her in front of an entire room when all this time she was family." Regina's eyes flashed. "She was a mistake. A reminder of everything I lost." "No," Adrian said firmly. "She's everything you could have had, a daughter who worked twice as hard to be half as respected." Silence fell between them. "I'm not asking your permission anymore," Adrian continued. "You don't get to decide what family means, not anymore." And with that, he walked away. Later that evening, Evelyn sat under the maple tree in the back garden, one she used to sweep around but never sit beneath. Adrian approached slowly, careful not to disturb her thoughts. "Did you know?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, but I'm not shocked. My father was generous in business and reckless in everything else." Evelyn held the birth certificate between her fingers. "Do you think I'm here because of this? That maybe she gave me the job out of guilt?" Adrian knelt in front of her, gently taking the paper from her hand. "No, you earned everything. Regina Whitmore doesn't keep people she can't control. And you, Evelyn, you were never someone she could mold." Evelyn searched his face. "So what do I do now?" Adrian's voice softened. "You write your own chapter, starting with this house or without it, but not because you're afraid of who you are." She smiled faintly. "You always say the right thing." "No," he replied, "I just finally stopped saying what I was taught." That night, Regina sat at her husband's old desk, staring at the empty Scotch glass. The house was quiet. Adrian had gone out. Evelyn had returned to her quarters. The staff walked softer than usual. And for the first time in years, Regina felt alone, truly alone. She reached into the drawer and pulled out an old photo, her husband holding a newborn baby. Not Adrian, not Evelyn. A baby she never got to raise. A child she buried with her silence. Her eyes glistened, but she wiped them away before the tear could fall. Weakness wasn't allowed in this house. But somewhere inside her, something was starting to fracture. At breakfast the next morning, Evelyn found an envelope at her place setting. No name, just a seal. Inside, a handwritten note. "The past broke us. I don't expect forgiveness, but I would like to speak with you. Just us. No silver, no gowns, just truth. Regina." Evelyn read it twice. Then slowly, she folded it and tucked it into her pocket. The sun hadn't fully risen when Evelyn walked toward the west terrace. The morning dew clung to the hem of her dress. She held the letter from Regina in her hand, folding it and unfolding it until the corners softened. No pearls, no staff, no expectations, just a quiet table, 2 chairs, and an invitation that felt more like a confession. Regina Whitmore was already seated, wearing a navy cardigan and no makeup, almost unrecognizable from the woman who once ruled dinner parties like a general. She didn't rise, she didn't smile, but she said, "Thank you for coming." Evelyn nodded. "You asked." Regina poured 2 cups of tea, one for herself, one she slid across to Evelyn. They sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that isn't empty but heavy, carrying all the words that had been swallowed over the years. Then Regina spoke. "I hated your mother." Evelyn blinked but didn't speak. She was everything I wasn't: gentle, flexible, soft in a world that punished softness. Evelyn's voice was quiet. She never wanted your life, only the truth. Regina looked away, and I buried it. For decades, told myself it was necessary, that I was protecting Adrian, protecting the name. You were protecting yourself, Evelyn said. From shame. Regina's hands shook as she lifted the teacup. And it still found me. Evelyn stood. She wasn't angry, not anymore, but she wasn't there for closure. She was there to reclaim something. I spent most of my life thinking I was less, she said, that I had to earn the right to be in a room. That silence was strength. That dignity meant never asking for what I deserved. She met Regina's gaze, but I was never a mistake. I was never a stain, and I'm done shrinking to fit in this house. Regina's eyes filled, but still no tears fell. Then softly she said the words Evelyn had never expected. I was wrong. Evelyn froze. You deserved better, and I can't go back, but I can step aside. 1 week later, the Whitmore Foundation hosted a new event, smaller than the gala, but important. Adrian opened the evening with a speech. Halfway through, he paused and gestured toward the back of the room. There's someone here tonight who spent her life being overlooked by people who couldn't see past a uniform or a last name. Someone whose strength redefined what legacy means for this family. Then he smiled, warm and proud. I'd like to introduce our new Director of Community Development, Evelyn Harris Whitmore. Gasps rippled through the room. Evelyn stepped forward, not in a maid's uniform, but a navy dress and heels. Her shoulders were back, her head was high, and when she took the mic, her voice didn't tremble. I used to think I didn't belong at tables like this, she said, but I've learned that sometimes the most powerful seat at the table is the one you pull out for yourself. Later that night, Adrian found her on the garden steps. Evelyn Whitmore, he teased. She rolled her eyes. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I didn't legally change anything. He sat beside her. Doesn't matter. The name never made you worthy. You always were. She looked at him, then asked for the first time without fear, "What do you want from this, from me?" Adrian reached for her hand. "I want whatever you're willing to give, whether that's a beginning, a middle, or a forever." Evelyn smiled, small but honest. "Let's just start with now." In her study, Regina stared at the portrait of her late husband. Then she opened a drawer and placed Evelyn's birth certificate inside, carefully, not to erase it, but to protect it. For the first time, she felt the silence in the house as something calm, not lonely. Evelyn walked through the mansion that night, not as a guest, not as staff, but as a woman who had rewritten the rules. She passed the hallway where she once stood in torn fabric. She passed the kitchen where she used to whisper so she wouldn't be heard. And finally, she passed the grand dining room where Adrian had once placed his jacket over her shoulders. She paused at the door, hand resting gently on the frame, and then smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because she wasn't broken anymore. If this story touched you, leave a comment. If you've ever had to fight to be seen, this story is yours too. And if you believe dignity is earned, not inherited, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next story that matters.